My father looked me in the eyes and said, "I know you paid off the $680,000 mortgage. But this house was never meant for you." What he didn't know was that karma was already listening. I still remember the exact sound the grandfather clock made when my father said it. Tick-tock. Like time itself was counting down to something irreversible. We were sitting in the living room of the house I had paid for, every brick, every beam, every silent night of sacrifice behind it. The late afternoon light came in through the wide windows, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. Floors I had refinished myself after working 14-hour days. Floors he walked on without ever asking how much they cost me. My father cleared his throat, folded his hands like a man delivering a verdict, and said the words that changed everything. "I know you paid off the $600,000-$80,000 mortgage," he said calmly. "But this house was never meant for you." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. I waited for a laugh, a correction, anything. Nothing came. Instead, he leaned back in the leather chair, the same chair I bought him because his old one hurt his back, and added, almost casually, "We've decided to give it to your brother." The clock kept ticking. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just felt something inside me quietly fracture. I wasn't always the daughter who had money. Once, I was just the extra child. The inconvenient one. The one who was expected to understand why sacrifices were always made for others, never for me. Growing up, my brother Daniel was the center of the universe. If Daniel needed new shoes, we found the money. If Daniel wanted to switch colleges, we rearranged everything. If Daniel failed, someone else was blamed. And me? I was the responsible one. The quiet one. The one who didn't need much. Or so they said. When I got into a state university with a partial scholarship, my parents congratulated me, and then asked how I planned to pay for the rest. When Daniel dropped out of college twice, they called it finding himself. I worked. I studied. I took loans. I said thank you when I should have said no. That was the pattern. The house entered our lives after my mother fell ill. She'd always dreamed of a place with space, sunlight, a small garden, peace. When her health started declining, my father panicked. Hospital bills stacked up. Rent kept increasing. They were exhausted, scared. I was already working in finance by then. Long hours, decent pay, no children, no spouse. So I did what I'd always done. I stepped in. "I can help," I said one night at the kitchen table. "I can put my credit down. We'll buy something stable, something safe." My father hesitated, but only briefly. The mortgage was huge, $680,000, 30 years. The loan was in my name. The down payment? Mine. The monthly payments? Mine. The renovations? Mine. I told myself it wasn't about ownership. It was about family, and for years I paid, quietly. I missed vacations. I turned down relationships. I worked overtime while my friends built lives. Every month, like clockwork, I paid the mortgage. Every year I reassured myself, this is temporary. One day they'll acknowledge it. But acknowledgement never came. Instead, entitlement did. My father began referring to it as our house. My brother moved in after his third failed business venture. He brought his girlfriend. Then his opinions. He criticized the furniture I bought, the rules I set, the sacrifices I made. Still, I stayed silent. Because that's what good daughters do. The mortgage was paid off in full after 11 years. 11, not 30. I made the final payment on a quiet Tuesday morning. I stared at the confirmation screen longer than I should have, heart pounding, not with pride, but relief. It was done. I thought, now things will change. That night, I brought the printed statement home. I placed it gently on the table like an offering. "We're free," I said softly. "The house is paid off," my father smiled. My brother raised his eyebrows. And my mother squeezed my hand, but no one said what I was waiting to hear. "Thank you." It's yours. You did this. Nothing. 3 weeks later, my father asked me to sit down. That's when he said it. I know you paid off the mortgage, but we're giving the house to Daniel. Just like that. I stared at him, my voice barely steady. You're giving it to him? My brother, who had been hovering near the doorway, stepped in. It just makes sense, he said. You're doing fine on your own. I need stability, a family home. A family home. The audacity tasted bitter. I paid for it, I said. I sacrificed for it. The loan is in my name. My father's expression hardened. You were helping the family, he replied. Don't make this ugly. Ugly. The words stung more than the betrayal. I looked around the room. The walls I painted. The lights I installed. The roof I repaired. Suddenly I felt like a guest in my own life. So what am I? I asked quietly. My father sighed, as if I was the problem. You're being emotional, he said. This is about fairness. Fairness. I stood up slowly, my hands trembling, not from weakness but from something awakening. I need time to think, I said. No one stopped me. That night I didn't sleep. I replayed every moment, every check, every missed opportunity. And for the first time in my life, I stopped asking what I owed them. Instead, I asked something else. What do they owe me? Because betrayal doesn't always come with shouting. Sometimes, it comes with calm voices, folded hands, and a smile that says, you were never meant to win. And that was the moment something shifted. Quietly, irreversibly. I didn't go back to the house that night. Instead, I drove until the city lights blurred into something softer, quieter. A small hotel near the edge of town where no one knew my name or my history. I checked in, took the keycard, and sat on the edge of the bed with my coat still on. For the first time in years. There was nothing I needed to do, no payment to schedule. No repair to plan. No apology to prepare in advance. Just silence. And in that silence, everything I'd been holding back finally began to surface. I kept replaying my father's voice. Don't make this ugly. As if ugliness hadn't already been decided, just not by me. I spent my entire life learning how to be palatable. How to soften my needs so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable. How to shrink gratitude into a substitute for fairness. That night, I realized something painful. They didn't betray me because I paid for the house. They betrayed me because I always had. The next morning, my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Your father didn't mean to hurt you. Please come home. Home. The word felt hollow now, like a stage set that looked solid from a distance but collapsed when touched. I didn't reply. An hour later, another message, this time from Daniel. You're overreacting. It's just a house. Just a house. I laughed out loud, a short, humorless sound that startled even me. It was never just a house. It was my 20s. My 30s. My postponed life. I went to work anyway. Numbers made sense. Numbers didn't betray you. At my desk, I tried to focus on spreadsheets, forecasts, projections, but my mind kept drifting back to the living room, the chair, the clock, the calm certainty with which my father erased me. At lunch, my colleague Sarah sat across from me and frowned. You okay? She asked. I opened my mouth, then closed it. What do you say when the people who raised you decide you're disposable? I'm just tired, I said. She nodded, unconvinced. That evening, I went back to the house. Not because I wanted to, but because all my things were there. Daniel's car was in the driveway. I hesitated before unlocking the door, suddenly aware of how strange it felt to need permission to enter a place I had paid for. Inside, my brother was sprawled on the couch, feet up on the coffee table. My coffee table. Oh, he said, glancing up. You're back, like I'd been on vacation. I'm grabbing a few things, I replied. He shrugged. Don't be dramatic. The word again. Dramatic. I walked past him, every step heavier than the last. In my bedroom, the smallest one because I insisted everyone else take the bigger spaces. I opened my closet and stared at the clothes that no longer felt like they belonged to the woman I was becoming. I pulled out a suitcase. As I folded, memories pressed in. My first bonus check spent on roof repairs. My promotion celebrated by refinancing at a lower rate. My 35th birthday, postponed because this month's payment is tight. I turned my success into a lifeline for people who never planned to let me rest. When I came back into the hallway, my father was standing there. "I hoped you'd calm down by now," he said. I met his eyes. "I'm calm." He shook his head. "You're being stubborn." Stubborn, another word they used when I stopped agreeing. "This is about family," he continued. "You don't abandon family over money." I felt something tighten in my chest. "I didn't abandon anyone," I said. "I helped. For years. And we appreciate that," he replied quickly. Too quickly. But appreciation doesn't mean ownership. There it was. The truth finally spoken. To them, my contribution was a favor, not a foundation. Not a right, not a claim. That night I left with 2 suitcases and a box of documents, mortgage statements, bank transfers, receipts. I didn't know why I took them. Not yet. But something inside me whispered, "You'll need these." The weeks that followed were some of the loneliest of my life. I moved into a small apartment closer to work. Clean, quiet, empty. At first, the silence felt cruel. Then, it began to feel honest. My family didn't call. Not really. My mother sent polite updates. My father sent nothing. Daniel sent one message asking when I planned to finish moving out. Finish moving out. As if I'd been the guest. I started therapy. It wasn't too dramatic or cinematic, just a small office with neutral walls and a woman who listened without interrupting. One afternoon, she asked me a question that landed harder than any accusation. "Why do you think they felt entitled to what you built?" I opened my mouth, then stopped. "Because the answer scared me. Because I taught them too," I said quietly. I began to see patterns everywhere. How I apologized when setting boundaries. How I explained my worth instead of asserting it. How I confused sacrifice with love. I wasn't just grieving the house. I was grieving the version of myself who believed endurance would earn respect. One evening, as I sorted through the box of documents, I noticed something I'd ignored before. The mortgage payoff letter. My name, alone, printed at the top. Not my father's, not the family's, mine. I sat back slowly, heart racing. Legally, the house wasn't theirs to give. I trusted them so completely that I never even considered it. I didn't act on it right away. Revenge wasn't loud in my mind. It was quiet, patient. I wanted to be sure. So I scheduled a consultation with a lawyer. A woman about my age, sharp-eyed, efficient. She flipped through the paperwork without commentary. Then she looked up. "You understand," she said carefully, "that the house is legally yours." The words settled over me like a heavy coat. "I do now," I replied. She continued, "And any transfer without your consent would be problematic. Problematic." For the first time since that afternoon in the living room, I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because clarity had arrived. Still, knowing the truth didn't erase the pain. At night, I dreamed of my mother sitting at the kitchen table, looking disappointed. Of my father shaking his head. Of Daniel smirking, victorious. I woke up with guilt clinging to me like fog. Was I really going to do this? Was I really going to stand up for myself, even if it meant standing alone? The answer came slowly, but it came. One afternoon, I drove past the house. I didn't stop. But I noticed something new in the driveway, a moving truck. Daniel was already settling in, already planning a future built on my silence. That's when the sadness hardened into something else. Resolve, because emotional struggle doesn't last forever. Eventually, pain demands direction. And as I drove away, I realized something profound. They thought my kindness was weakness. They mistook my patience for permission. They had no idea. That the woman they dismissed was finally done explaining herself. And that realization, quiet, steady, undeniable, was the beginning of something they would never see coming. Revenge didn't arrive like a thunderstorm. It came like paperwork, quiet, methodical, unforgiving. The morning after I drove past the house and saw Daniel's moving truck, I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and created a folder labeled Property, All Documents. For the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting. I was preparing. I started with facts. The mortgage, sole borrower, me sole payer, me paid in full 11 years early the deed. Still in my name, never. Transfer never amended. I'd trusted my father to handle the details. He never had. That trust, his greatest weapon, had become my shield. I met with the lawyer again that week. This time I didn't sound uncertain. I want to understand my options, I said. She nodded. There are several. She explained them calmly like a doctor outlining treatment. I could evict. I could demand rent. I could sell. I could force a legal reckoning. Each option carried consequences. Not just legal ones, emotional ones. Because revenge isn't satisfying if it turns you into someone you don't recognize. And I wasn't interested in cruelty. I was interested in justice. Before you do anything, the lawyer added, you need to decide what outcome you want. I thought of my father's folded hands, Daniel's smirk, my mother's silence. I want the truth acknowledged, I said. And I want my life back, she smiled slightly. That, she said, is achievable. I didn't tell my family anything. That was deliberate. Instead, I watched. I learned. I listened to secondhand updates through distant relatives and mutual acquaintances. Daniel was renovating, on credit. My father was telling people he'd secured the family home. My mother was hosting dinners again. Playing normal. Normal, built on my erasure. One evening, Sarah invited me out for a drink. You've changed, she said carefully, swirling her glass. In a good way? I asked. In a stronger way, she replied. I smiled. She didn't know how right she was. I began documenting everything. Text messages, emails, voicemails, every casual admission, every assumption. Daniel texted one afternoon. When are you coming to get the rest of your junk? Junk. I saved it. Another message came days later. Dad says you'll cool off. He's letting me redo the kitchen. I saved that too. The hardest part was my mother. She called one Sunday afternoon, her voice soft, cautious. You're really not coming by anymore, she said. I wasn't invited, I replied. A pause. We didn't want to upset you. The irony almost made me laugh. Mom, I said gently, you didn't protect me when it mattered. She sighed. I raised you to be generous. And I learned, I replied, that generosity without boundaries becomes self-destruction. She didn't answer. That night, I wrote something down for the first time. I'm not responsible for their comfort at the cost of my dignity. I taped it above my desk. Weeks passed. I let Daniel settle in deeper. Let him invest money he didn't have. Let him feel secure in something he didn't own. Because real karma doesn't rush. It waits until the fall costs more. I ordered a professional property valuation. Quietly, the number came back higher than I expected. My house had appreciated significantly. More than enough to change my future. More than enough to expose theirs. The lawyer and I mapped out a timeline. Step 1. Formal notice. Step 2. Undeniable proof. Step 3. Public accountability. Not on social media, not in anger. In a room where lies couldn't survive paperwork. There were nights I doubted myself. I'd lie awake, wondering if I was cruel, if I was selfish, if I was betraying them. Then I remembered something my therapist once said. Guilt is often the echo of old conditioning, not evidence of wrongdoing. That echo grew quieter each day. One afternoon, I received an invitation. A family dinner at the house. My mother's handwriting on the envelope. We should talk. I stared at it for a long time. This was it. The moment before the reveal, even if they didn't know it yet. I replied with one sentence. I'll be there, and attached nothing else. No warnings, no explanations, just presence. In the days leading up to the dinner, I'd prepared everything. Copies of documents, a clean folder, tabs labeled clearly. I chose what to wear carefully, not to intimidate, not to provoke, just to stand as the woman I'd become. Calm, certain, unmovable. The night before, I stood in front of the mirror. I barely recognized the woman looking back. Not because she looked different, but because she no longer looked apologetic. I didn't do anything wrong, I said aloud. The words didn't shake. Revenge stories often show dramatic confrontations, shouting, tears, doors slammed, but the most powerful revenge is letting people walk confidently into the truth, believing they're still in control. As I turned off the lights and went to bed, I knew one thing for certain. They thought the story was already written. They had no idea that the final chapters belonged to me. The house looked exactly the same from the outside. Same stone steps, same wide windows, same carefully trimmed hedges. But as I pulled into the driveway that evening, I felt like I was approaching a place that no longer recognized me, and didn't realize how much that was about to matter. Daniel's new car was parked where mine used to be. I noted it. Then I stepped out, folder tucked neatly under my arm, and walked toward the front door. Inside, the air smelled like roasted chicken and something sweet, cinnamon maybe, my mother's attempt at normalcy. Her way of smoothing sharp edges before anyone could notice them. She greeted me with a careful smile. You look well, she said. So do you, I replied. It wasn't untrue, but it wasn't the point. My father was already seated at the head of the table. He didn't stand, just nodded once. Sit, he said, as if I were a guest. Daniel appeared moments later, confident, relaxed, wearing the expression of a man who believed the ground beneath him was solid. Hey, he said. Didn't think you'd actually come. I met his eyes. I said I would. Dinner began with small talk. Weather, work, a neighbor's dog. Every sentence was a performance, a fragile attempt to pretend nothing had shifted. But beneath it all, tension pressed like a held breath. They were waiting for something, an outburst, an apology. A concession they got none. Halfway through the meal, my father cleared his throat. I think it's time we addressed the situation, he said. The situation. I set my fork down carefully. I agree. Daniel leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Good, he said. Because this dragging on is exhausting. I almost smiled. My father spoke first. We've discussed this as a family, he began. And we still believe giving the house to Daniel is the right decision. He paused, watching my face. I didn't react. It keeps the home in the family, he continued. And you're independent. You always have been. There it was. The compliment that was really a justification. I want to be clear, I said calmly. About what exactly you're asking? My father frowned slightly. You know what we mean. I do, I replied. But I want to hear you say it. Silence stretched. Daniel shifted. Finally my father said it. We expect you to sign the house over. The words landed heavily. My mother's eyes flicked toward me, anxious. Daniel nodded, satisfied. I took a breath, then another. Before I respond, I said, I'd like to ask something. My father sighed. Go on. When did you decide I wasn't part of this family? The question wasn't loud, but it was sharp. My mother inhaled sharply. That's not fair, she said quickly. We love you. I don't doubt that, I replied. But love without fairness is just sentiment. My father frowned. You're being dramatic again. I smiled. Then, controlled. No, I said. I'm being precise. I reached for the folder, not opening it yet. Just placing it on the table. The sound it made was small, but everyone noticed. I've spent weeks thinking about this, I continued. About loyalty. About sacrifice. About what I owe and what I don't. Daniel scoffed. Here we go. I turned to him. You've lived in that house for 6 months, I said. Tell me, how much have you contributed? He shrugged. I'm fixing it up. With whose permission? I asked. With Dad's, I nodded slowly. And with whose money? He hesitated. My father interjected. That's irrelevant, is it? I asked. The tension thickened. My mother stared at her plate. My father's jaw tightened. Daniel's confidence flickered, just slightly. I don't want this to be ugly, my father said. So let's handle it privately. I leaned back in my chair. This is private, I replied. Just not quiet anymore. I opened the folder. Not all the way. Just enough for the top document to show. The mortgage payoff letter, my name bold and undeniable. Daniel leaned forward. What's that? Proof, I said calmly. My father stiffened. We know you paid, he said. That's not the issue. No, I agreed. The issue is that you think payment doesn't equal ownership. I slid the document toward the center of the table. Along with the deed, still in my name. The room went still. My mother looked up sharply. What is this? She whispered. I met her gaze. The truth, I said. Daniel laughed, a short, uneasy sound. You can't be serious, he said. Dad? My father didn't answer. He was staring at the paperwork, reading, realizing. You never transferred it, my mother said softly. My father swallowed. I didn't think it mattered. I nodded. That's been the problem all along. Daniel stood abruptly. So what? He snapped. You're just going to take it back? I looked at him. I never gave it away, the words echoed. The clock on the wall ticked, just like it had weeks ago, only this time. It wasn't counting down to my silence. It was counting down to something else. My father finally spoke. You wouldn't do this to your own family. I held his gaze. You already did it to me. No one spoke. Not for a long moment. The weight of truth pressed down on the table, heavy, undeniable. This wasn't the end. But it was the moment everything shifted, because now they knew, and knowing changed everything. Karma didn't explode into the room. It seeped in quietly, like water finding cracks in a foundation that had been pretending to be solid. After the documents hit the table, no one reached for them again. They just sat there, undeniable, patient. Proof doesn't rush. It waits for people to catch up. My father was the first to stand. We need a moment, he said, voice tight. Daniel nodded quickly. Yeah, this is getting out of hand, as if truth were a tantrum. They moved into the study, closing the door behind them. I stayed where I was, my mother still seated across from me, her hands folded, eyes distant. For the first time, she looked small. I didn't know, she said quietly. I believed her, but belief didn't undo damage. I know, I replied. She looked up, tears gathering. You should have told us you were hurting. I exhaled slowly. I did, I said. Just not loudly enough to make anyone uncomfortable. The door to the study remained closed for nearly 30 minutes. Voices rose and fell behind it, muffled, urgent, edged with panic. I recognized the tone. It was the sound of control slipping. When my father and Daniel returned, something was different. Daniel's confidence was gone. My father looked older. We need to discuss next steps, my father said. I nodded. That's reasonable. Daniel shot me a look, sharp, resentful. You blindsided us, he snapped. I met his gaze. You built a future on an assumption, I replied. That's not the same thing. My father cleared his throat. The house, legally speaking, he began, is yours. The words tasted bitter in the room. My mother gasped softly. Daniel froze. But, my father continued quickly, we can work something out, of course. Work something out had always meant you give, we keep. I leaned forward slightly. I'm listening. Daniel jumped in. I've already put money into renovations, he said. I can't just leave. I tilted my head. How much? He hesitated. That's not... How much? I repeated calmly. He named a number. It was less than 1 month of mortgage payments I'd made for 11 years. I nodded. That can be reimbursed, I said. Upon vacating, Daniel's face reddened. You're kicking me out? I didn't raise my voice. I'm reclaiming my property. My father slammed his hand on the table. Enough, he snapped. This is still a family matter. I met his eyes. It stopped being one when fairness was removed. Silence fell again. The following days unfolded faster than any of them expected. Formal notice was sent. Deadlines were set, not cruel ones, not rushed, just unavoidable. Word spread, not dramatically, but steadily. Relatives called. Some angry, some curious, some suddenly apologetic. You did the right thing, one aunt whispered. They always favored Daniel. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like truth catching up. Daniel tried persuasion next. He showed up at my apartment unannounced one evening. I didn't think you'd actually go through with it, he said. I know, I replied. He scoffed. You've always been soft. I smiled slightly. Only with people I trusted. He leaned against the wall, voice lowering. You know Dad's health isn't great, he said. This stress, I held up a hand. Don't weaponize concern, I said. If you cared, you wouldn't have accepted what wasn't yours. He stared at me, then left. My father called 2 days later. I raised you better than this, he said. I closed my eyes. You raised me to sacrifice, I replied. I taught myself self-respect. The eviction date approached. Daniel scrambled, looking for alternatives, loans, sympathy. None came easily. Because people are generous. Until generosity costs them something. On the final day I went to the house. Not to gloat. To close a chapter. Daniel was loading boxes into a truck, jaw clenched. My father stood on the porch, watching, helpless. I walked past them, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. It felt different, lighter, like a space that could finally breathe. I didn't say much. I didn't need to. Karma wasn't loud. It was precise. That evening, after the house was empty, I sat alone in the living room. The same grandfather clock ticked steadily. Tick, tock. Only this time, it sounded like freedom. Because karma isn't punishment. It's alignment. And everything, finally, was where it belonged. The house was quiet in a way it had never been before. Not the tense quiet of unspoken resentment, but the honest kind, the kind that comes after storms pass and debris settles. I stood in the doorway of the study, holding one last envelope. Inside it was something I'd prepared weeks ago, on the advice of my lawyer. Not a threat. Not a demand, a reveal. The family meeting wasn't my idea, it was my father's. He called 2 days after Daniel moved out. We need to talk, he said. All of us, I agreed. Not because I owed them closure, but because truth deserves witnesses. They gathered in the living room again, same table, same chairs, different balance of power. My father sat rigidly, hands clasped tighter than before. My mother looked exhausted, older than she should have. Daniel wasn't there. That, in itself, was telling. He didn't want to come, my father muttered. I nodded. I figured. My father cleared his throat. I made mistakes, he began. The words sounded rehearsed. I handled things poorly. Poorly. That was his version of accountability. I trusted you, I said quietly. Not just with money. With respect. My mother looked up, eyes wet. He didn't think you'd mind, she whispered. You were always so strong. Strong. The word that had excused everything. I placed the envelope on the table. There's something you should see, I said. My father hesitated. What is it? Clarity, I replied. Inside were copies of everything. The loan. The payoff. The deed, but also something else. A notarized statement. My father's signature, years earlier, authorizing me full control of the property in the event of family dispute. He'd signed it without reading, trusting me the way I trusted him. Irony has a way of circling back. My mother covered her mouth. I don't remember this, she said. You weren't meant to, I replied. It was supposed to protect everyone. My father stared at the page. You planned this? I shook my head. No, I said. I prepared for responsibility. You mistook that for obedience. Silence settled. Not defensive now, reflective. I want you to understand something, I continued. I didn't do this to hurt you. My father scoffed weakly. Then what did you do it for? I met his eyes. To stop hurting myself. The words landed harder than any accusation. My mother reached across the table. You didn't fail us, she said softly. I squeezed her hand. I know, I replied. But you failed to protect me. Tears slid down her face. This time she didn't deny it. The reveal wasn't dramatic. There were no raised voices. No slammed doors. Just truth, spoken plainly, without anger. And that's what made it unbearable for them. Daniel called later that night. Not to apologize, to accuse. You humiliated us, he said. I leaned back against the couch. No, I replied calmly. I let reality speak. He laughed bitterly. You think you've won? I paused. This was never a competition, I said. It was a correction. The following week, the house officially returned to me in every legal sense. But more importantly, so did my voice. I didn't keep the house. That surprised everyone, including me. I sold it, not in anger, not in revenge, in intention. The market was strong. The profit was substantial. Enough to rewrite my future. When my father heard, he called immediately. You sold it? He asked, stunned. Yes. I smiled softly. Because it served its purpose, I said. And so did the lesson. I moved out of state. Started fresh, smaller home, brighter mornings. A life that didn't require justification. Months later, my mother visited. We walked through my new place slowly. You seem lighter, she said. I am. She nodded. I wish we'd seen you sooner. I met her eyes. You see me now, I said. That matters. Some stories end with punishment. This one ended with truth. Because the most powerful reveal isn't paperwork. It's the moment people realize you were never asking for permission, only respect. Closure didn't come with apologies. It came with distance. The kind that lets you hear your own thoughts without them being drowned out by expectation. After I sold the house and moved away, my life grew quieter. Not empty, just intentional. Mornings were slower. Evenings belonged to me. For the first time, I wasn't measuring my worth by how useful I was to other people. I stopped explaining myself. That alone felt revolutionary. My father and I spoke less. Not out of anger, but because there was nothing left to negotiate. When we did talk, his voice was different, careful, less certain. You always were capable, he said once, during an awkward phone call. I didn't respond. Capability had never been the issue. Recognition was. Daniel didn't call again. I heard through relatives that things hadn't gone well for him. New debts. Old habits. Familiar excuses. For a moment, guilt tried to return. Then I remembered something important. Saving someone from consequences only teaches them to repeat mistakes. I chose not to interfere. My mother tried, in her own quiet way, to rebuild something honest. She sent letters instead of advice, questions instead of expectations. One day, she wrote, I didn't know how much you carried until you put it down. I folded the letter carefully. Some realizations arrive late, but they still count. A year passed, then another. The story of the house became something people referenced in hushed tones. The daughter who took back what was hers. Some said it with admiration, some with judgment. I didn't correct either. Because stories change depending on who tells them. Truth doesn't. One afternoon, while sitting on my small balcony, I caught myself smiling for no reason. That's when I realized something profound. I wasn't healing anymore, I was healed. People often ask if I regret it, if I miss the house, if I wish I'd handled it differently. The answer is always the same. I miss who I was before I thought love requires sacrifice without limits. But I don't miss the silence. Here's what I learned. The lesson no one teaches daughters like me. Being generous does not mean being disposable. Helping family does not mean surrendering your future. And standing up for yourself is not betrayal. It's alignment. Karma isn't cruel. It's corrective. It doesn't punish people for hurting you. It simply removes the illusion that they could do so without consequence. I didn't win because I took something away. I won because I stopped giving myself away. And that, quietly, powerfully, changed everything.